All right, everybody. Welcome back to House Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee. It is Thursday afternoon, January 12th, and we are starting off our afternoon here with a discussion about regional planning commissions and development. And I will let Charlie and Catherine introduce themselves to the committee. And this might be if you would like, we can kind of go around real quick and say where folks are from. That might be, if that's useful to you too. But,
sure.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
To introduce yourselves and we'll take it from there.
Thank you for having us. I'm Catherine Dimitrick. I'm the Executive Director of Northwest Regional Planning Commission, serving Franklin and Grand Isle counties.
And Charlie Baker, sorry that you're seeing me twice in 1 week. Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission.
Deeply appreciate you coming twice so we could get that your blessing on our open meeting bill, which will be
enthusiastic.
Yeah, and a preview of coming attractions in about 40 minutes. Tucker will be back with a little amendment that Ways and Means did a couple of fixes for us to polish up our bill. So we'll do a straw poll on that when that time comes. Yeah, so new committee might be a good opportunity, I think, to just go around the room real quick, maybe starting with you, Representative Murwicki, and just say where you're from. And so folks have a chance of understanding the regions we're representing here.
Thank you. Greetings and welcome. I'm Mike Murwicki. I live down in Windham County. I serve Putney and Dummerston, the Windham 4 district. So we're within the Windham Regional Commission with Chris Campany, who's doing a great job.
Hooper, Burlington, almost Colchester. Been here for a while.
Michael Morgan, you're both important to me because I live in West Milton. I represent Grand Isle County and West Milton, as well as on the select board. So I see Charlie a lot, and then obviously having Grand Isle over Catherine. So I'm linked to both of you, whether you like it or not.
Ditto.
Lisa Hango, Franklin 5. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Lucy Boyden. I live in Cambridge and represent District Memorial 3, which is Cambridge and Waterville.
Representative Matt Byrong, live in Virgins, represent a total of 6 communities now in Northwest Addison County.
And I'm Mike McCarthy, the chair, and I know both of you. And
Mark Higley from Lowell. So I represent a bunch of towns up that way, as well as the town of Eden, which is in Lamoille County. So Orleans County and then Lamoille for Eden.
South Burlington type.
And we're missing Representative Jay Hooper, who represents Randolph and a couple of 4 other towns, which are escaping me at the moment.
Yeah. Braintree, no.
There too. Yeah. Roxbury.
It's Shay Waters Evans from Charlotte.
And Seth Chase, Colchester. Yeah, good to see you.
Well, thank you so much for having us here today. We thought we'd take a little bit of time to just talk about regional planning commissions and what we do and how it relates to your work and the priorities of the House and the Senate in this biennium. So first, we'll talk about RPCs generally. So regional planning commissions are established across the state. There's 11 of us. We are political subdivisions of the state of Vermont. Some people think we're nonprofits, but we're actually government entities, political subdivisions of the state. And we're really uniquely positioned to provide capacity to our towns and cities. So many of your communities that you represent have no staff, town clerk, maybe a part-time zoning administrator, public works. And when there's projects that need to be done or programs that need to move forward, they rely on us to serve as their on-the-ground staff. We work in lots of different areas: transportation, water quality, energy, land use, and we're going to talk about each of those particularly as we go through this. And if it's okay with the chair, we're happy to take questions as we go. People have them?
Yeah, I usually have people raise their hand and I'll recognize them. We're staying pretty formal with that, but I'm happy to facilitate that if you're willing to have your presentation interrupted.
Absolutely. It's good to have a conversation. So one of the things that regional planning commissions do a lot is participate in state policy discussions because of our unique role being on the ground with municipalities and working with state agencies and serving that absence of county government role, we can bring a lot of perspective to state policy discussions. And so we encourage you to use us, rely on us, call on us for opinions, information, and access to municipalities and the needs. An example of this is with the Climate Council. We had 2 Regional Planning Commission directors serving on the Climate Council, and myself and Chris Campany, and our terms just ended this fall.
I'll pick up, we're doing a little tag team here and hopefully, yeah, there's a PDF if you want to follow along. So Catherine mentioned there's 11 of us. There's about 125 staff across the 11 RPCs. And probably, I don't know what our budget's probably at least $2 million each. So there's probably 20 something million dollars of investment. So if you can almost think about us as kind of a state agency that's just with 11 offices. And we do a lot of coordination, which is why we have our state association to make sure we're all working and doing similar work. And every one of our agreements with a state agency is a performance agreement. So we almost, in some ways, almost work like a public sector consulting agency. We get paid when we do certain deliverables, whether it's for town or for state agencies. So just to give you a little sense of the dynamics, we don't, the only basic general funding that we get is from the regional planning grant. And I think you guys may now be our committee of jurisdiction. We used to be in commerce for years and years, but I think maybe with the shifting things, we're now here. So we may be talking to you more specifically about money at some point. I'm not sure about that, but maybe the chair will correct me at some point.
There are some questions about that are still hovering in the rules committee. So stay tuned. I also am a little unclear about exactly where that will land.
We're happy to carry the message to multiple committees if needed. On this slide, we also have just a little bit about economic development and town bylaws, a little bit more, but there's a map there if you want to see kind of the RPC boundaries related to county boundaries. Northern part of the state, they line up pretty well. As you get to the central and further south, there's some little differences between county lines and regional planning commission boundaries. Sorry, I thought that was going to work better. Regional planning, so we do regional plans. There's a statutory requirement for us to do a regional plan every 8 years. And I think there's 14 or 15 elements, so topical issues we're supposed to address in that. Very similar what towns are required to do if they decide to do a town plan. But the big difference is, as opposed to a town that can choose to do a plan or not, we have to do a plan. And so, it's something to where we're kind of looking at all the state planning work that has been done in different agencies and policy work, what's been happening at municipalities, and try to weld it together to reflect kind of how well we can address all the goals that are in state statute, which there are a lot of, maybe something that we review at some point in time.
And there is a bill that's been introduced, H5, that will be asking the regional planning commissions to take a look at how we do regional planning, specifically the future land use planning, to see if we can achieve some consistency across the regions and how we approach that. With the idea, the state planning office hasn't happened. There's really no state agency that does land use planning in a comprehensive way for the state. So perhaps this is a way that it can be done comprehensively, yet still connected to towns and cities. So we're going to be looking at that if that bill goes through. And even if it doesn't, we'll probably still move forward and really take a look at how we can use the regional plans to more effectively move state and local policy forward.
Thank you. Really good thought and addition. The next slide really talks about the support that we provide to municipalities for developing their plans and implementing them. And lots of times when we're talking about implementing a municipal plan, we are talking about zoning bylaws, if a town chooses to have zoning, or any other programmatic or capital investment type projects that would help them implement their town plans. Again, feel free to interrupt with any questions along the way. Economic development. So we just started there. This slide shows us having done economic development work in 155 towns. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, these numbers that we're reporting are kind of come from our annual report to the Agency of Commerce for FY22. So these are all FY22 results really that we're reporting out to you. A lot of the economic development, it may have something to do with infrastructure. It might be a sewer project or water project. A lot of it's brownfields work. So doing brownfields assessment work to see what if there's contamination, to get it cleaned up before it can be redeveloped. And of course, and actually I think the next slide, sorry, as I'm transitioning to brownfields, we did that in 55 communities. And of course, that's pretty fundamental to have economic development. And a lot of those are in our villages and centers where there was, activity going back historically. So we do a lot of work with DEC and with Agency of Commerce on the Brownfields program. Anything you want to add to that?
I will just say that Brownfields is a great example of a program where we coordinate with state agencies and with each other. So regional planning commissions, whenever we can, try to do efforts on a coordinated statewide basis. So with the Brownfields program, there's a few regions in the state, including Northwest Regional Planning Commission, that have a revolving loan fund for cleanup. And even though it's been awarded to Northwest Regional Planning Commission, and we got, gotten about $2.5 million from EPA, we don't just serve Franklin and Grand Isle counties with that. We've done projects in the Upper Valley. We've done projects in the Moyle County, projects in the Northeast Kingdom. So we make our funding available to other regions. So we don't all have to have cleanup revolving loan funds, but we try to bring some efficiency by coordinating together.
It's so good. Housing. No surprise. I mean, there's a big issue around housing in the state right now. A lot of our work is kind of at the front end of that, again, with zoning bylaws to try to enable and support housing in the right places. And some of us have also been just kind of working on housing goals for our regions. There's a little blurb about what we've been doing in Chittenden County. Northwest is also doing something similar, but probably something that's worthy of some further state conversation of like, where are we going with housing and how best to get there? It's certainly more than a money issue. It's more than Act 250. It's more than municipal zoning. And there's probably also a judicial appeals issue. But, all four of those are going to be important to making real progress on our housing. And we'll have a little note at the end. Happy if you're going to get more into that. Happy to talk more about that at a future time.
So another area we do a significant amount of work in is water quality. We do project identification, development, and implementation. So we will work with a community or a property owner on an idea. We'll get funding to move that idea forward, and then we'll help manage the project when it gets built. So we're involved from idea to completion. And we do that in the transportation area, working with towns directly in meeting their state permit requirements. And we also are participating in a new effort at the state level, which you might hear about, the Clean Water Service Provider model, where the State Department of Environmental Conservation is basically delegating to entities the ability to actually get these projects identified and built. So for the Missisquoi and Lamoille Basins, funding to do water quality projects is now going to travel through Northwest Regional Planning Commission rather than through the state agency. And similar to other areas in the basin where Chittenden RPC and Addison RPC are involved as well.
And Rutland and Central,
and Rutland,
the
right,
whole
so
Lake
all of us, yes.
The whole Lake Champlain watershed is covered by these clean water service providers now, and Memphremagog. And so water quality GIS.
So GIS, Geographic Information Systems, you may have heard of, it's a computer-based mapping and analysis system that all regional planning commissions have. So many of the maps that you may have seen in your town offices or at state agencies is done using this GIS program. Regional planning commissions use this for information purposes, for analysis. Like we can take these digital maps and layer different things, like here's a wetland, here's a endangered species, here's a conserved land, and we can get a picture of what the land looks like that we can show visually. We also do, in our region, we do some neat things, like we do town atlases for every town, where there's a book that we make of maps of every town road, and we give them to our public works crew, our dispatchers, our emergency services personnel. So we can do a lot of really neat things with GIS.
Transportation planning, that's another major program with V-Trans we have, called the Transportation Planning Initiative. And again, that's really looking at what the transportation needs are in the community and coming up with priorities. And then we also work then to report those up to V-Trans to get included in the capital program. So that's a lot of analysis work, safety projects, things like that. Emergency preparedness, we work a lot with VEM, so we have a contract with them also, or I should say a grant agreement, more technically correct, to support emergency management. Actually, RPC staff each of us has 3 staff that are trained to be supplemental staff at the Emergency Operations Center. So when they get into a big disaster, or even it was just a few weeks ago that they were concerned that we're going to have a major disaster, we kind of get calls that our staff are on call to come assist the EOC, and that really that happened some kind of by fire during Irene, but really after Irene, we worked with emergency management to institutionalize that. So our staff get continually trained, just like the emergency management staff at the state, to support that. So we kind of, just like we do for the towns, providing kind of supplemental staff for key projects, we're able to do that same thing for emergency management in the SEOC and provide that overflow staffing when needed. And we also do, one specific role we play more frequently is identifying what damages occurred locally. So, can't remember what the term is for that, local damage liaison. Oh, sorry, that was a test of myself. Anyway, so yeah, we're involved in that. And we also do emergency management planning. Every town is required to have I think that's what it's called, a local emergency management plan that gets adopted every spring after the select board gets seated. So we're kind of the go-between between the state and the towns to get those done. Energy planning. You may remember a few years ago, a lot of controversy about projects and where renewable projects were going to happen. And the legislature tasked us with doing regional energy plans through the Department of Public Service. So probably an agency I didn't mention earlier or yet. So we work in partnership with them. We all have a regional energy plan. And that identifies both where not to do things. So there's kind of protected resources. And then there's, here are locations within each region that are more better places for renewable energy, whether it be wind or hydro or solar. And so that's actually been a pretty good model because it was, yes, we did it regionally. There was some state guidance, but we are also a lot of bottoms up work with our towns of like, hey, does this make sense to you all? And then a lot of towns have followed through to develop their own enhanced energy plans, which gives them more weight in the Public Utilities Commission when things are going through Section 248 processes there. So anyway, there's a lot in the energy. Sorry, I just feel like I just threw a lot of minutia at you, but.
And then we do fun stuff too. So in the energy sphere, especially, we really are doing a lot of work with towns to help them identify, where's a great place for an EV charger and how do you get funds to do it and how do you get it installed? We did a really fun project called Window Dressers, which started in Southern Vermont, I think was the first area that it happened, where you help, you build these storm window inserts for houses and they're free for low income residents. And it's a really fun project. And we were able to help a number of residents get some better weatherization for their homes and just really getting into the on the ground implementation of Vermont's climate goals. The Climate Action Plan really relies on municipalities and citizens to do a lot of work to help us reach our climate goals. And we're starting to work in that space to help towns meet their expectations and help citizens understand more about what's coming.
I do this one?
Sure. So additionally, we also, we do our best to coordinate among ourselves, regional planning commissions. So we have some pretty clear statewide consistency on some projects. And then we also work to implement regional projects and statewide projects. And a great example of that is the communications union districts that have started up across the state. in most cases, the Regional Planning Commission was pretty instrumental in supporting the development of the Education Union District, either by providing just technical expertise, or in some cases, like in our office, we not only provided the administrative support and financial management for the organization when they started, but we had the executive director on our staff for quite a number of months until they were able to fledge the nest and move on as an independent organization. So that's a great example of where the regional planning commissions could step in and do this collaborative effort across towns on behalf of the statewide goal of broadband. Additionally, the whole state now is going to be covered with what's called economic development districts. And that is a special federal designation from the Economic Development Administration. In order to get that designation, you have to do this comprehensive economic development strategy. So you had to meet all the federal hoops. The regional planning commissions, the regional development corporations have coordinated to make sure that's this case for the whole state, which makes the whole state now eligible for special funds that go through the Economic Development Administration. So it's a real collaborative effort that will lead to more federal dollars being able to come into Vermont.
And the other thing I'll add to this is that I don't know.
Yeah, just a quick question, Catherine. Those EDCs, the Economic Development Districts, will the money come from the federal government directly to the RPCs for that?
So the planning dollars is about a $100,000 grant that we get annually to do the economic development, technical assistance planning, and that for our district is the 6 northern counties. So it's shared among all of the RPCs and the RDCs across the 6 northern counties. And then the implementation, the capital dollars that EDA gives out goes to either private or nonprofit entities. So like the Fairfax sewer extension for the maple sugar manufacturer, that was paid for with an EDA grant. And they were able to get that grant because we have the district.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and really important to know or keep in mind, we work with the regional development corporations there, like that's our key partner there. We're working on the CEDS, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, for the last remaining part of the state that isn't in a district right now is Central Vermont here, Chittenden County, Addison County, Rutland County. So the 4 of us regions are working together to form a district right now, and that process is underway. And we're almost done with the CEDS, and we'll probably be applying for district designation at the end of the year. And the other thing I was going to mention was just also when we have towns that are looking to provide a service, and sometimes it's too expensive for them to do by themselves, we're typically the folks have that first conversation with them, like I think you're doing stuff with like zoning administration right now. We've been doing some stuff to help towns comply with their clean water permits as a group. There have been other, we set up a public safety authority to look at dispatch and other public safety authorities, but we're typically where that conversation starts. And then the Communications Union District is another example of that, where it's a group of towns coming together. Hey, can we do this service together? Maybe sometimes it makes sense for them to do it by themselves. But if it is something that can be done collaboratively, we're the ones facilitating, supporting that conversation. And I know, in Gov.Ops, it feels like it's where we live. We're trying to figure out how to make all these systems and resources and the government structure work together.
And we're seeing more and more interest and requests at the municipal level for that intergovernmental services. As Charlie mentioned, we serve as a zoning administrator for 2 towns, and we have 3 more towns that I think will be requesting us to do that with their next fiscal year, because it's so challenging to find staff to do this work, especially if it's a 10-hour-a-week job or a 20-hour-a-week job. And there's growing interest in listing services as well. So in Lamoille County, there's going to be a joint intermunicipal effort run by the RPC to do listing for several communities. And we've talked about that a little bit in Grand Isle County as well. So there's growing need for that as it gets more and more complicated at the local level.
And we'll try to wrap this up. The last slide we had in there was just planting some seeds for if you get into some of these subjects, we'd be interested in providing future testimony. Open meeting law that happened yesterday, so
Oh, it's still happening.
Oh, okay.
It ain't over until you.
Happy to come back.
Conversation.
Happy to come back if needed.
As many times as needed.
Yeah.
I think we're just looking at a technical correction, but yeah, I think our bill is, it's got a good path.
Yeah, and I know there's, going to be discussion down the road about the permanent change, so.
We'd love
yeah.
to be part of that discussion.
Yeah. And the second bill we put on here was this government relations and collaboration issue. And we, do the best we can with the tools, but, you had some discussion yesterday about being a Dillon's rule state, right? So as we work with municipalities, they can only do what the state legislature empowers them to do. And we're in that same boat. We are a political subdivision, a municipality of the state. One of the mechanisms that exist in other states, I'm just going to plant a seed with you about, is because it's so difficult to get a mechanism of the governance structure of how to get municipalities coming together. Like almost every one of these times, we have to form basically a new municipality, right? A CUD is a new government. The Public Safety Authority we set up was a new government. We're doing this a lot, and we've done a lot over the decades. We have a lot of these entities that have been created over the years. Other states have evolved, probably they may have started with an RPC or something like it, into councils of governments. I think in Vermont, I would call it more of a council of towns, but it allows the towns to actually work together collaboratively at the same table in a more formal manner. So just planting a seed of something that might be worth enabling at least, and let the towns decide if they want to go down that path. A few years ago, there was a conversation in the legislature about it. It ended up expanding our ability to do shared services, but that has like some hooks in it that have made that more challenging to do at times. So anyway, sorry, that was maybe a little bit more than a seed. I don't know. An idea and rural capacity, the rural caucus met this morning. Certainly conversation as we have all this federal funding coming into the state about small town capacity. And sorry, I feel a little bit weird being from Chittenden County talking about this. But it's an issue, even in Chittenden County, we do have small towns. And so, and that is our work. Like we got created to support our towns. So we're very interested in being, if you have more conversations about that, very interested in being at that table and figuring out how we can help. Some of that may just be money. Some of it may just be some other things that, about how we do that thing or how we work with state agencies. But interested in that conversation. And then the last thing, and sorry, this is really because we deal with, as you can imagine, we've been talking about a lot of different processes. I think there's a lot of paperwork involved in some of this. And so we do have some interest in trying to make the granting and contracting with state agencies more efficient. This is almost kind of a silly thing in a way, but what happens lots of times is there's a program that gets set up by the legislature, like, okay, we're going to fund this. Pick your agency. We're going to do this, and it involves working with something that needs to happen down to the municipal level. And they go, oh, well, how are we going to deliver this? And they come to us and like, we should probably work with you guys. I was like, that's good. That's who our members are. That's who's at our tables, the municipalities. But then they have to go through an RFP process as if it's a competitive procurement because it wasn't specified that they were going to work with us. And so hoping at some point there's either some change in statute or rule that would make it easier for agencies, when they have a program that they're going to work with municipalities, that makes it easier for them to get to agreements with us without going through a 3-month kind of fake procurement process. Sorry, that was a lot I just threw at you.
Do you know if that's in statute or rule?
It could be cleaned up in either.
Yeah, that may be the easiest way to go by rule.
It could be. We have floated that with the administration.
And you're back here.
I'm letting you know it might need some statutory help.
All right.
And I think that I think it's a legitimate concern. Like we want to have competition in the marketplace and, you want to support the private sector as well. But lots of times there's these things that are really, it's public sector work.
Yes, it's not going to be private sector.
Other questions about regional planning and development? Representative Nugent.
Just wondering if there's anything that the legislature could do to help support the coordination on housing. It sounds like some of that's already happening. Is there any, and are there barriers doing that currently?
So I know there's a couple of different housing bills being worked on that I've seen drafts of, and I think there's some really great stuff in those. So I would say yes to what I've seen so far in those bills. There's one issue that Charlie and I have talked about, and we mentioned in Senate Economic Development this morning, is that there's no good mechanism for actually counting homes. So right now, nobody tracks how many new homes are built every year in an accurate and systemic way. So we have these ideas of what we need. Chittenden has goals. We just completed a housing needs analysis and we'll be setting some targets, but we have no consistent way of counting how we're reaching those goals. So we've talked about whether there's ways to get into how the grand list reporting is done, to actually report changes to the number of units as part of that. It's not currently done. I understand there's some barriers. Some legislative direction in that area could likely be really helpful.
Yeah, and that's just kind of the start of that
Yes,
conversation.
that's just one kind of seemingly easy thing.
I just had rental registry flashbacks.
No, so that is, of course, a portion of how something like that could happen. But it's not just about rental, it's about all housing, so.
No.
I know.
So that conversation.
Yeah.
On the rental front, as opposed to, you're talking about freestanding homes right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or multifamily structures, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have to understand the inventory to understand the process, the success, the failures, all of the things. If we don't know what the catalog looks like, how can we work?
Yeah, most of the numbers you see reported are kind of like, they're coming from the census, really. They're not generated by Vermont. They're like, did we do 2,200 units? That's what the census thinks we did last year, but that's what towns are supposed to report it to the census, but maybe not always. Particularly if it's a small town, you have one or two houses that happened last year. They may not be used to dealing with the census reporting.
And what gets reported is the permits,
Yeah.
not the constructed homes.
Not the completed project.
Yeah.
Which are not always one and the same.
And there's a lot more, and Catherine's being a little bit humble too, I think, but we've been participating in some of those conversations that happened in the off season to get to some of the draft housing bills that are out, or I don't know if they're even introduced yet, but there's significant work. And I kind of mentioned it earlier. It's actually the VLCT board talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I'm kind of like, yes, there's municipal zoning issues. The state has permitting systems, both agency and Act 250. There's the appeals process, and then there's funding, particularly for affordable housing. So there's some real opportunity to make some improvements there.
And some of the additional funding that's happening through the IIJA, the infrastructure bill, as well as ARPA, that provides additional funding for water and sewer, will have a huge impact on our capacity to build more housing, not immediately, but down the road.
We're doing a lot of jargon busting in this committee today. So for the uninitiated, you'll recall that there were several rounds of federal legislation that provided money for. There was the CARES Act, there was ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, and then
There's that one in between everybody else.
Yeah, the infrastructure bill was later. Right, and that's like a regular old bill, not like a COVID bill, but big money. And so, but that had a lot of money that came in Vermont that we're starting to see roll out for wastewater and other projects, right?
And that's water projects are definitely an area that regional planning commissions are right on the ground with our municipalities. If you got a town like South Hero who has a town clerk and is now finally hiring a town administrator, they don't have the capacity to manage that whole project. So they work with us and work with the state to get it done.
Well, I want to give the committee a couple more minutes to answer any last minute questions. We've got a few more minutes before we're scheduled to have Mr. Anderson give us our next little bit of testimony. I mostly wanted to have you all in as an introduction because as we're talking about some of the things that will come before us, I think about public safety, EMS, dispatch, and you could see from the presentation that Catherine and Charlie just gave us, they touch on things that often are really talked about in other rooms in the State House, other committees, transportation, being just one, energy, that they're kind of in the intersection of municipal and state government. And I don't want to forget how powerful that is as a catalyst for getting the money where it needs to go and getting technical assistance, especially to smaller communities that don't have that staffing. So really appreciate the work that you do and thanks for giving our committee a first little summary of the many different ways that you touch on projects. Any last questions before we wrap up our planning and development and move on? Great. Thank you both.
Thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Good to see you all. Look forward to next time.
Thank you.
Not again tomorrow, Charlie.
No, not tomorrow. You're off the hook.
Right. Well, I think if Tucker, you're ready to go on a few minutes early, I think we are ready. So switching gears here, I gave you a little preview. I was up in House Ways and Means earlier and they had 3 instances of amendment and I believe you can find those on the legislative website under Ways and Means. Wait, are they on? Is the new bill as voted out of Ways and Means. Now, under today's date, under Tucker Anderson's name, page 42, Ways and Means Amendment. It is, all right, so before I turn it over to Tucker, especially to orient new folks, I'm gonna take just a moment and talk about a couple of things. So first, sometimes if we want to make changes to an amendment or there's further policy work to do, we're going to wait for the bill to get back to the floor and be officially referred back to our committee. I believe that what is going to come before us, and Tucker will elaborate, are some technical amendments. I don't think, as your chair, I don't think we're going to need to make further changes or discuss policy deeply. So I'm just going to take a straw poll at the end of this as my intention, unless there's any objection. But, and that'll save us some time out there on the floor where the bill's got to officially be back on the floor and be referred back here by the speaker. You following me so far? That was the one little rules note for the uninitiated.
Her eyebrows said no.
So
My eyebrows said a lot of things, but yes is what I think.
Every time the bill's got to come back to our committee, it's got to get noticed out there and then be sent back here and then be noticed out there on the floor and then sent back. Yeah, so we're just going to say, if everybody's cool with this, then we're not going to have to officially take possession of the bill back. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So we're taking some testimony on the Ways and Means Amendment, but we don't actually officially have the bill. That's where we're at right now. The other thing I wanted to mention is that what Tucker's about to present to us are specific instances of amendment that do not have any context, really. So if you want to have the bill itself up on your device, I highly recommend it because these specific instances of amendment read by themselves won't make any sense at all. So you need to have the bill as we voted it out to understand how the Ways and Means Amendment is amending it. So I would recommend having both of those things up on your device. The other way we could do this is a strike all, and we'll get to all of that fun stuff in our next parliamentary and Mason's discussion here. But Tucker, I'll turn it over for you to talk about these specific instances of amendment.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel. As a person with prolific eyebrows, I always appreciate how well they communicate what I'm experiencing in the world. As the chair correctly pointed out, this amendment is presented as 3 specific instances of amendment, and there's a lot more on the page than what they're actually doing, because what we do with instances of amendment is we describe where in the bill we are making the changes. and that takes up a lot of space. Most of these amendments are striking one or two words or symbols. The first two are very technical in nature. The first is correcting a citation in Title 16 for the Australian ballot provisions that apply to union school districts. So the former section 711, subsection E, was subsequently moved effective July 2022 to 723, subsection A. So I made that correction here. The second instance of amendment, someone reached out to me and said, this language reads very awkwardly because of this word held. And where this was located is it said the annual municipal meeting held by vote of its legislative body. Annual meetings are not held by the legislative body, they're held by the municipality. Moderator oversees it, right? What that language was actually trying to say is that modifier at the end, by vote of its legislative body, is modifying something much earlier in the sentence. And by striking held, it makes it far clearer that that's what we're saying. We're saying that the legislative body can vote to apply Australian ballot, not that they're voting to hold the meeting to apply the Australian ballot. All right. The third instance of amendment is substantive. The intent of this amendment, if you recall, was to permit different ballot language to be used in this current year until the suspension of this ballot language takes place July 1st, 2024. Was that the language in Act 127 used fiscal years to describe when this was taking place. Fiscal years run from July 1st through the next June 30th. So the language that was presented to me and to you all used fiscal years. Unfortunately, that meant that it couldn't be used this year because the fiscal year doesn't start until July 1st. So this was amended to strike the reference to fiscal year and instead to just replace it with 2023 and 2024.
So I believe you and I had assumed that because the ballot language was about a ballot question affecting only fiscal year 24 that we were covered. That is not the case. So this fixes the
correct
our 10 as we voted it out of committee. Clear.
And again, the language in Act 127 used fiscal years as the basis for the suspension of the statute. So the intent was to carry through to whatever that fiscal year, 5-year period was going to be starting July 1st, 2024, but it left a 6-month gap in the current year, which is now covered.
So we have 2 technical amendments, 1 substantive amendment that clarifies what I think our original intent was that.
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Any concerns about this amendment and Ways and Means? Representative Henry.
Thank you. I don't have any questions about this amendment or concerns about the actual amendment. But since yesterday, since our vote, I learned a little more about the school budget ballot language requirement. And I'm not entirely, although I'm not going to vote against this technical amendment, these technical amendments, I do want to be on record as saying that I am a little more hesitant to suspend for the number of years that we're talking about, but I understand why we're suspending this year if the others were already suspended in previous statute. But it does remove a little bit of transparency, whether it's accurate or not for voters when they look at this item on their warning. It does alert them that there are changes coming because of this budget. So I think it's worth revisiting. And I think you mentioned, Mr. Chair, that the Chair of Ways and Means is interested in revisiting this in the future.
I think you'll find if you look even at their a lot of their testimony this week is about orienting the new Ways and Means Committee to the entire ed finance system, the people waiting work that is underway and just beginning. And that the original reason that we as the legislature last biennium said that we're going to suspend this requirement is that specifically the percent increase in equalized per pupil. So if I'm a taxpayer, the thing I'm looking for is, are my taxes going to go up? How much is the school budget, et cetera? But the specific language about the percent increase in the equalized per pupil spending actually doesn't inform a taxpayer all that much about their tax rate or the dollars that their school district is going to get, especially in an environment where one of two things is happening. If their common level of appraisal has really dropped, St. Albans City, COVID housing sale prices, CLA did a double-digit decrease. So the percent equalized per pupil spending went way up. So you have this number that is shockingly bigger by percentage that doesn't actually tell the voter anything about their actual tax rate or the dollars going to their school. And that's why, because of all of the changes with the people waiting initiative, that language was suspended as a requirement. We're already experiencing some of that this fiscal year, hence the desire from a lot of our superintendents, school boards, et cetera, to provide meaningful information to voters and not be required to report these wild changes in the equalized per pupil spending.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. And since we are not the tax committee, we probably don't need to object too much right now, but I do hope that it is taken up and revisited and comes back in a more meaningful way for voters.
Great. Any other questions, comments, and concerns? So since we don't have possession of the bill, I, as the reporter of the bill on the floor, would like the opportunity to be able to give the sense of the committee on the Ways and Means Amendment. Could I just see a show of hands of folks who support adopting the Ways and Means Amendment? All right, so that looks like 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, if everybody's here, 12-0, so I would say on a straw vote, the House Government Operations is in favor of accepting the Ways and Means Amendment to our bill as a friendly amendment. And with that, I think we are on, really lost track of the agenda here. I think we're back at 2:15. So let's take